If I Only Knew by Wanderlove. Chapter 13. The one and only thing this blasted war has been any good for is giving Obi-Wan plenty of excuses to be off planet during the annual Master Superlatives. For 2 years now, he's managed to very neatly sidestep the awards, called away by battle and time-sensitive mission. Quinlan is all too happy to keep him informed about his ongoing status as the reigning Master I'd like to cliff, and someone had even told the clones at one point, so now they're in on the joke too. One of these days, Obi-Wan is going to accidentally miss one of those droid blaster bolts headed straight for Anakin's legs and not be the least bit sorry. Unfortunately, Obi-Wan forgot to check the calendar when scheduling this latest leave. I just don't get why you're so put out about it, Anakin says, limbs folded awkwardly in the small space of the temple closet and fiddling with a small rotund electromechanical component. They've been hiding here together. Well, Obi-Wan is hiding. Anakin had just shrugged his shoulders and followed him in. For nearly 2 hours now. Obi-Wan shoots him a withering look. Get back to me after you've had 12-year-old Padawans walk into a column because they were too busy ogling you, he replies waspishly. Master Yoda says the superlatives are important to maintaining morale in these dark times. Anakin replies solemnly. You're just doing your part. Remind me what you got again? Most likely to crash the ship and claim it was part of the plan all along. I don't remember that category. Ahsoka said they added it just for me, Anakin says proudly. He frowns a little and begins loosening a bolt with his metal fingers. He flips open a thin plate and peers inside. Wizard! He breathes in awe as he turns the component over in his hands so that he can examine it from another angle. What did you say this was supposed to do? I don't know, Obi-Wan replies with a shrug, not quite able to suppress his smug pleasure at the sight of Anakin's bright-eyed fixation, all because of something Obi-Wan gifted him. I just saw it in a junkyard in Sundari and figured you'd appreciate the challenge. I know the Mandalorians use different wiring conventions than most of the rest of the galaxy. Anakin hums in agreement, bringing the little component closer to his face. Very challenging. You know, I don't think I've ever gotten my hands on something like this before. They guard their tech so jealously, and it's not very compatible with most other tzai IF boards, let alone the headache that are the heat exchangers. So it's not like anyone's going out of their way to get around the embargo. When he looks to Obi-Wan, his eyes are sparkling. Thanks, Master. Of course, dear one, Obi-Wan says. Anakin flashes him a brief but genuine grin, then returns his attention back to the component in his hands. For a few moments, Obi-Wan contents himself with basking in the contentment that Anakin radiates. Then, when the temptation grows too great and he decides that Anakin is sufficiently engrossed in the puzzle at hand, so as not to notice his scrutiny, he gently extends a tendril through the Force to brush against Anakin's mind. Ever since his realization many months ago that he must convince Anakin of his suitability as a romantic partner, Obi-Wan has carefully engaged in little displays of his affection, such as the small thoughtful token Anakin now holds in his hands. Throughout the whole process, he has carefully, attentively monitored Anakin's feelings in the Force for even the slightest hints of change. Each foray is an expedition of quiet expectation and bitter disappointment, hoping against hope that this will be the moment that will alter Anakin's feelings towards him. This time is no different. He is confronted with the same tender, enveloping warmth he's sensed since Anakin was 16. The first analogy that comes to mind is the feeling of wonder and belonging that Anakin derives from sitting in a ship's cockpit as he watches the stars blur by, wrapped in a thick, well-made blanket to repel the cold of space. It isn't easy to describe. But then again, reading another sentient's mental state through the Force is never as straightforward as non-Force sensitive likes to believe. Yes, some feelings are more obvious than others, and there were some similarities, but on the whole, the way most sentients experienced emotion was completely unique and rather difficult to gauge unless you were extremely familiar with the sentient in question. After all these years, it is easy enough for Obi-Wan to pick out most of Anakin's emotions without even thinking, almost like blinking or breathing. But it's hard to try and identify something as ill-defined, sprawling, and complex as love, especially when he has never actually witnessed Anakin in love, and so he doesn't even know what to look for. Really, the quickest, simplest solution would be for Obi-Wan to track down Anakin's crush, shove him in the same room as Anakin, and then observe how Anakin felt in the Force while interacting with the other man. But Obi-Wan is not about to give up one of his few advantages over his unknown competitor, time with Anakin. So good old-fashioned wait and see it is. In the absence of familiarity, most Jedi just relied on observation, sampling the Force periodically to try and establish which feelings were associated with which impressions in the Force. If you could get the other person to showcase at least two different emotions, it would at least give you some sort of baseline to work off of. That's why lies were often so easy to pick out. Sentience switched between sincerity and deceit quite often within the span of a single conversation. You just had to ask a few questions you knew the answer to, some you didn't, and then sit back and observe. Emotions were harder. Most species don't vacillate between two extremes in just a few minutes, unless under unusual stress. Obi-Wan's comm beeps and he sighs. Anakin tracks the movement with watchful eyes. Knight Sakura and Master Windu want us in the war room, Obi-Wan announces. He stands to his feet, opens the door to the closet by the tiniest of slivers, and then gestures expectantly. Anakin gives him an eye roll. Coward, he mutters, but dutifully sticks his head out and looks both ways. He ducks back in and flashes Obi-Wan a smirk. Coast is all clear, Master. No sign of the enemy. Obi-Wan makes his way out of the closet, cautiously, slowly at first, and then faster once they reach the more trafficked areas of the temple. Obi-Wan tries to project an air of busy purpose so that no one will approach him. Despite Obi-Wan's fears, they do indeed make it to the war room in one piece, where they find Masters Windu and Plo Koon deep in discussion, and Knight Sakura waiting patiently to the side. Master Plo Koon gives a short nod, indicating that he and Master Windu have noted their arrival, and gestures for them to keep themselves busy for a few minutes while they wrap up. A gentle smile blooms across Isla's face as she spots them. Isla! Anakin greets with a smile. It's good to see you in person for once. Ha! Agreed! Isla chuckles. I at least have the benefit that hollows do not disturb my natural color. You humans always look so odd washed out in blue. Blah always complains that the hollows turn his yellow paint blue. Says that it turns all troopers into some terrible version of 501st. It's apparently quite the sore spot amongst the other battalions. And how is Commander Bly? Obi-Wan asks. Isla shrugs. As well as can be expected given the discovery of these terrible chips. She sighs. I'm afraid to say he's handling it far better than I am. Some Jedi I am, no? It's only to be expected, Obi-Wan says gently. It can be difficult not to worry about the ones we care for, and you have more cause for concern than most. When is his surgery? Obi-Wan asks. Isla's face turns pitched. He lost the lottery. He's one of the last on the roster, she says quietly. Faced with so many clones to dechip and such limited resources, the clones had fashioned a random selection process spread evenly across all battalions to determine who would get the surgery and when. Can't you pull rank and get him in a little earlier? Anakin asks with a frown. I'm sure given the situation, his brothers would understand. I've heard, she admits. But he refused, was insulted that I even asked. I've never seen him so angry. Can't you, Annie? No, Ayla interrupts, her voice kind of scolding. It's a risk to his life, yes, but that's his choice to make. And he's already had so many other choices taken away. I wouldn't do that to him. And that's why you are an excellent Jedi, Obi-Wan says firmly. This by all your protestations. I do not believe most of the council would agree, Isla replies dryly. Obi-Wan waves a hand, glad that they can now joke about this. Isla's petition to the council, supported by Master Plo Koon, had been an interesting meeting, to say the least. But for all their fervent disagreement, the more conservative members of the council had at least admitted that freeing the clones and winning the war ranked at least a little bit higher on their list of priorities than punishing a single general who had had the temerity to fall in love. Master Kenobi, Knight Skywalker. Master Windu greets them finally. They turn and he gives them a tight nod, arms crossed. Obi-Wan frowns a little at the exhausted, wan cast of Master Windu's features. It is likely not noticeable to Anakin and Isla, but there's a tiny crease at the corner of his mouth, the slightest of bags under his eyes, that mark the toll this war has taken upon Master Windu.
Thank you all for your quick response times. Padawan Offie has an update regarding the surgeries for actively deployed clones, and as the generals of some of our most prominent battalions, I knew you would all be anxious for news.
Good news? Anakin asks, sounding worried.
I'll let Padawan Offie explain.
Master Windu replies with an incline of his head. He activates the holo table, and they are greeted by the flickering, severe face of Barriss Offie. If she is ruffled by the prospect of personally delivering her report to 3 council members and 2 of the most lauded knights of their generation, she certainly doesn't show it. Mace nods once, tightly.
Proceed.
Our ramp-up is proceeding according to schedule, Padawan Offie reports in a measured voice, hands clasped in front of her body. She is straight-backed, confident. Commander Gree's original hunch had played out beautifully, and she is now so different than the scared, war-scarred teen who had arrived on Tatooine all those months ago. Her months-long mission had been a great success. From what Shmi had told Obi-Wan, Barriss, Beru, and Cut had hardly slept the entire time, not until they had hit upon a surgical procedure that was both less risky for the clones and easy to teach to the Jedi healers and clone medics who would need to perform it. The celebrations after the first successful trials had been legendary, apparently. Barriss had emerged with a newfound sense of serene but righteous purpose and had volunteered to personally take charge of coordinating the Gar-wide chip removal surgeries. Everyone agrees she is doing a superb job, and Master Luminara is unbearably proud of her Padawan, even floating the possibility of knighthood. A little over 3% of all active battalions have undergone the procedure, and after this latest round of medic training, I expect to be able to double our daily procedure rate. Complication rates remain low, though serious when they do occur.
A wave of pleased murmurs passes through the gathered generals. And the recovery times?
Master Plo Koon asks. If Obi-Wan remembers correctly, at least 2 members of the Wolf Pack are up for their surgeries this week. Ranging from just over 2 rotations to a standard week, largely depending on the strength in the Force and the experience of the healer or commander who is aiding the process. Padawan Tano has proven to be particularly adept at this particular procedure. I have excluded her numbers, as she alone drags the average down by a full rotation. Anakin's chest puffs up considerably. Obi-Wan may be rolling his eyes externally, but even he can't quite hide the flush of pride that escapes his shields, and Master Windu gives him a droll look.
This is fantastic news,
Obi-Wan compliments. She nods, accepting her due.
Given these facts, do you have any idea if our goal of 100% deactivated, 50% chip-free in 2 years is feasible?
Only if we remove the secrecy requirement, Padawan Offie replies with a shake of her head. I can certainly get to 100% deactivation, as it is easy enough to set off the EMP pulse for large groups, and while the clones are a little woozy for a rotation afterwards, it's nothing too debilitating. But the surgeries require one-on-one attention, and we are currently only using senior Padawans and commanders in order to avoid anyone tracking and questioning the general's actions. Like I said, experience and force strength help speed up the procedures, so I suspect being able to enlist the generals would speed the process considerably.
We cannot risk exposure until all the chips are deactivated at the very least.
Master Windu sighs.
I know Pons would never forgive himself if his hastily planned ill-concealed surgery was the reason this shadowy creator discovered the plans and detonated one of his brother's chips.
Let's prioritize deactivation then, Anakin offers. Senator Organa officially wrangled the Kaminoans into submission and kicked them out of the last of the medical outposts, so there's no longer anyone but Jedi to notice the recovery period.
We must be careful, Obi-Wan cautions, and monitor the Separatists closely. No one may notice a woozy squad or 2, but they certainly will if we mistime it and disable an entire battalion right before a big attack. Very well, Padawan Offie, Master Windu says authoritatively. Prioritize deactivation, but unless the battalion is on Coruscant for leave, limit it to no more than 10% of a single battalion in recovery at one time. We look forward to your next update.
She inclines her head. Of course, Master Windu. May the Force be with you.
And with you.
They all echo as her figure winks out. Obi-Wan and Anakin begin to move away when Master Windu shakes his head and holds up a hand.
Not you, Kenobi. He calls out, "We have a council meeting. Our shadows are reporting some troubling intelligence."
Have fun, Master, Anakin says cheerily as Obi-Wan shoots a narrow-eyed look of betrayal as is retreating back. He sighs and turns back to Masters Windu and Plo Koon.
"Shall we?" "Put it! You want me to do what?"
Obi-Wan blinks at the Jedi Council. Master Windu's grave eyes bore into the side of his head.
"Demand absolute secrecy in this mission, close," Master Yoda emphasizes. "Easy it will not be."
"I understood that," Obi-Wan replies with a wave of his hand. "But I could have sworn I heard you say—" "You can tell no one of the plan, not even Skywalker,"
Master Windu repeats, interrupting and leveling Obi-Wan with a stern look. Obi-Wan's mouth snaps shut with an audible click. He gapes.
No one outside of this council may know that you still live, Master Mundi continues, side-eyeing Obi-Wan. It is the only way to ensure your safety and the success of the mission.
"Surely you can't doubt Anakin's loyalty,"
Obi-Wan finally manages to say, flabbergasted.
"He would never do anything to endanger such an important mission."
Of course not, Master T's hologram says softly but firmly. But Skywalker has never been the greatest of actors. You know this. We know this. And most importantly, Count Dooku knows this. If he were to start questioning Skywalker's behavior, the entire mission would begin to unravel.
"And we only got one shot," Master Fisto adds. "If we fail, Dooku's guard will be up, and we will never get a similar opportunity."
"We have only a very limited window. We have already engaged the services of a bounty hunter named Ryko Haldane. Once we have him planetside, we'll need you to place yourself into a suitably tempting position. You'll be wearing a blaster-proof vest, of course, but it's critical we saw the moment—" "No!"
"What?" Master Windu's voice is a harsh crack across the room.
"No, I can't." "Is this about Skywalker?"
Master Windu says disapprovingly. His whole demeanor screams, "I knew that's the part you'd dig your heels in about!"
Master Kenobi, you cannot let your attachment to the boy affect your duty to the Republic,
Master Gallia says, as strong as the reproach in her words.
"You misunderstand me,"
Obi-Wan says quietly, throat suddenly dry. He refused to stare at the ground like a guilty, scolded padawan.
"As most of you are aware, Anakin and I still share a strong mental link through the Force. Even shielded, Anakin would never fall for such a ruse, not for very long anyways, and I do not think I can break the bond, certainly not without the help of an experienced Force healer. Even then, I suspect we would need Anakin to lend his strength to the Force."
"I understand you two shared a relatively strong Master-Padawan bond,"
Master Plo Koon says mildly,
delicately.
"but bonds like what you just described are rare. At any rate, they require nearly constant unshielded bond use for many years."
He trails off, then shares a look with Master Windu. As one, the entire council turns to stare at Obi-Wan.
"Indeed,"
Obi-Wan responds with a pursed lip, humorless smile.
"Show us this bond you will,"
Master Yoda says severely with an authoritative rap of his gimme stick.
"Verify your claims myself. I will."
Obi-Wan stands gracefully to his feet and glides forward, coming to kneel in front of Master Yoda, who extends a gnarled hand and touches the points of his claws to Obi-Wan's temple. Obi-Wan watches Master Yoda close his eyes and then lets his own eyelids fall shut as well. With a deep inhale, Obi-Wan opens up his first layer of shields, the gossamer thin but still strong ones guarding his nervous thoughts. It is an odd thing having someone else in his mind who is not Anakin, the infinite, indescribable expanse, suddenly just a tad smaller, his atoms sliding against something that's not quite him, much like he is brushing up against a wall that is just a tad too rough to be entirely comfortable. Obi-Wan looks inward until he locates the glowing pinprick of golden warmth that represents his awareness of his bond with Anakin. He takes a moment to draw a shield across his side of the bond, so that Anakin will not feel Master Yoda's appraisal. He does this often during council meetings. Anakin will not be the least bit surprised or suspicious. Then gently brings the bond to the forefront of his mind, where Master Yoda patiently waits. Master Yoda reaches out, curling a tendril of his senses around the bond, an impression of doubtful, curious, left on Obi-Wan's mind. One's mind in the Force is not really a physical space, but it is how human brains often choose to interpret such sensory inputs, and so Obi-Wan gets the sense that Master Yoda is gently cradling the bond between his claws, stroking and poking at it with feather-like touch. Master Yoda grunts. There's a second noise, this one surprised, irritated, and wondering in equal measure.
How long will it take you to admit that I was right?
Obi-Wan asks lightly.
Such a bond speaks to your attachment to the boy it does.
Master Yoda harrups.
Unbecoming of a High Counselor, it is.
I know, Master, which is why you should realize that there is no deception here. If I wanted to lie to the High Council, I have far more reason to hide rather than exaggerate its strength.
Deny it, you do not even try.
Were you not the one who taught me that there is no try, only do or do not?
Yoda pushes the image of whacking a 10-year-old Obi-Wan's shins with his giver stick. Even as a memory, the blow stings.
Why would I deny something that you already knew? I failed to believe the Council was completely unaware of my attachment to Anakin when they nominated me to my current seat. Obi-Wan continues. What master is not attached to their padawan?
Not like this.
Master Yoda scolds. There's another feeling of eyes looking the bond up and down.
Seen nothing like it, have I, in hundreds of years. Stretch how far your awareness of each other does.
We can communicate verbally planet-wide, across an entire system span, and we can still send impressions, memories. More than that, and our awareness shrinks only to vague binaries, healthy or injured, awake or asleep.
Remarkable it is.
Remarkably unseemly,
Obi-Wan quips wryly.
Indeed.
Master Yoda withdraws first mentally, then physically. When Obi-Wan opens his eyes, he sees the entire council looking expectantly to Master Yoda. He waits for one moment, then two.
The truth, Master Kenobi, speaks,
he declares quietly. There's a sharp inhalation that seems to roll through the council as one.
Difficult to shield fully it would be. Impossible long-term. Painful and damaging. Severance would be.
There is silence.
If you still believe I am best suited for the mission, Obi-Wan says, as though nothing has happened, then I will accept. But I must be allowed to explain the situation to Anakin and fashion some sort of smokescreen. You are right, he is terrible at subterfuge, but we can send him away from Coruscant, away from the vultures in the holonet press and Dooku spies, a meditative retreat to grieve in peace. Before the war, it was a relatively common prescription when a former master or close friend died. Dooku will think nothing of it.
We are in the midst of a war. We can't afford to have two of our most highly ranked generals sidelined by this mission.
Then you will have to find someone else.
Obi-Wan responds placidly. He affects an air of unconcerned confidence.
So what shall it be?
Obi-Wan stops just inside the entryway to his and Anakin's shared quarters. Yet another sign of attachment the council was sure to dredge back up after this whole mess was wrapped up. Leaning against the wall and taking the moment to simply observe Anakin in peace. He has been greeted with the all-too-pleasant sight of a shirtless Anakin sunk deep into the Force as he slowly cycles through his evening moving meditation session. His eyes are closed, brow smooth and worry-free, the Force crystal clear and calm around him as he slowly, carefully surrenders himself to its currents. The Force seems to embrace him with the joy of a mother greeting a favored son, responding so easily, so naturally to his every thought and movement. It doesn't last long. As attuned to Force as Anakin is in this moment, it takes only a few moments more for him to sense Obi-Wan's intrusion. His eyes slowly flutter open, and Obi-Wan must remind himself that they have important matters to discuss. He can't just jump his Anakin right then and there. Anakin breaks off the last form and turns to face Obi-Wan, an open, quizzical look on his face. He takes in Obi-Wan's serious demeanor and nods knowingly.
Another mission,
he guesses with a sigh. He rolls his shoulders back and grabs a glass of water from the kitchen, gulping it down and looking unfairly attractive while completing such a mundane task.
Okay, where are we headed? I am headed to the Coruscanti underworld. You are staying right here, at least for now.
Wait, what? Anakin slams down the glass of water and looks incredulously to Obi-Wan.
Dooku has been reaching out to some of the galaxy's most talented bounty hunters as part of a plot to kill the Chancellor, we think. If we are to protect him, we must have someone on the inside. I will be going undercover to fulfill that role. Okay, but you'll need backup,
Anakin says slowly, as if he thinks Obi-Wan has suddenly taken leave of his senses. I know I'm not great at undercover missions, but I'm sure we can find some role that doesn't require me to try and lie.
It's not that sort of mission, dear one.
What? They're just tossing you into Dooku's clutches without any backup. A long pause, Anakin's outrage growing every second. That's insanely dangerous!
Precisely, which is why it is critical that my cover is airtight,
Obi-Wan says patiently. Anakin narrows his eyes.
Just say whatever it is you're trying to say. The council will be faking my death.
What?
I will be taking on the persona of Rhaego Hardeen, a highly skilled marksman for hire. As an audition of sorts, he will be completing a hit on me, at which point the council will capture him, and we will switch places. It will give me the credibility necessary to worm my way into Dooku's potential list of hires, and also provide an explanation for my sudden and conspicuous absence from the battlefield. I don't like this. Then you'll probably like this next part even less,
Obi-Wan says with a heavy sigh.
No one can know I'm still alive, Anakin. Not the other Jedi, not Senator Amidala, not even Ahsoka. No one. If anyone were to even guess a whisper of the truth, my life would be in mortal danger, to say nothing of the mission itself. But you're telling me. I know it will be difficult for you to keep it a secret, but I wasn't about to lie to you. Not about this.
But the council wanted to.
Yes, initially,
Obi-Wan admits. At Anakin's dark look,
he turns his tone gently scolding. As you yourself had admitted, you are a terrible liar. It's not a position without logic. But I explained my own logic, and they came around.
You mean you threw a hissy fit and refused to accept the assignment until they conceded? Anakin snorts. He steps closer, their chests nearly touching.
Well, yes. Obi-Wan pauses. We'll have to arrange for you to go off-planet once the ruse begins. You cannot be allowed near anyone who might guess the truth. But I was thinking, your mother has been none too subtly complaining that you never visit in person. Perhaps you can go to Tatooine.
Faking your death and exiling me to a planet full of sand. You're right, I really don't like this plan. Anakin hums, more amusement than anger suffusing his words. Obi-Wan relaxes slightly. There is still a fraught tension in Anakin's eyes and shoulders, worry suffusing the bond despite the lightness to his tone and the air of amusement he is trying to project. But worry is better than the anger Obi-Wan had feared. When Anakin speaks next, his voice is low, reluctant.
We'll try it your way. But if you're going up against Dooku, you're going to need my help, Master. I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself, you know.
Obi-Wan reassures him.
I did manage to survive nearly 25 years without you.
Yes, one of life's great mysteries. Anakin teases, the bond still tinged with fear. Anxious, don't leave me. Anakin's flesh hand rises, trailing gentle fingers along the curve of Obi-Wan's cheekbone, his temple. Obi-Wan can't help it. He leans into the touch. When he meets Anakin's eyes again, his eyes are smoldering like a low-banked fire. Lips slightly parted.
Thank you,
he says quietly,
for trusting me with this. I don't know how I would have reacted if I really thought you had died, but I don't think I could have forgiven you for that. I remember all too well what it was like to lose one's master so abruptly,
Obi-Wan replies, equally hushed.
I was helpless to stop it, could only clutch desperately at the bond as Qui-Gon slipped away. I refused to put you through that for a mere pantomime. You never talk about Naboo, at least not to me. Yes, well, it's not exactly a time in my life that I like to revisit. I barely survived the initial destruction of the bond, and never mind the torrent of grief and anger that plagued me afterwards. But you did survive. Yes, but only because of you,
Obi-Wan says with a gentle smile.
Anakin gives him a startled look. It was much easier to pull myself out of bed every day, knowing that you were depending on me. Instead of my own despair, I had to focus on wrangling a small, stubborn 9-year-old boy into eating his vegetables, wearing clean clothes, and finishing his meditation sessions. No small distraction, I assure you, especially when I was convinced you hated me. I didn't hate you, Anakin says automatically. Obi-Wan gives him a look. I just thought you resented me. Qui-Gon said he would train me, but then I just kinda got dumped in your lap when that fell through. I thought for sure you hated me, and I hated you in turn, at least for the first few weeks. Oh, Anakin! Obi-Wan shakes his head. Don't you realize how hard I had to fight to keep you as my padawan? Wait, what? You always told me that it was Qui-Gon's dying wish. It was, but that doesn't mean the council made it easy for me. It was agreed that you should be trained, but Master Windu wanted you to go to an older master, one who had already raised a padawan to knighthood, and had the experience to handle you. I practically had to beg, even threaten to leave the order before they gave in. You never told me that before. Anakin breathes. The bond is a fluttering thing right now, tangled with emotion. Obi-Wan says nothing in return, simply allowing the moment to stretch a little longer into the night and relishing the strong, steady thrum of Anakin's heart. The last council meeting before the Rako Hardeen mission is a cold one, stretching long into the evening. It filled with sorting out the details of Obi-Wan's cover without any of the usual banter that accompanies such long, boring meetings. For some, worry for Obi-Wan and his life clearly are at the forefront of their minds. Others, the success of this mission and the knife's edge the Republic balances on, while still others are clearly perturbed by Obi-Wan's insistence on hiding nothing from Anakin. Masters Mundi and Galia have never been Obi-Wan's biggest supporters, but they have always respected each other as Jedi. He gets the sense that the bond, as fresh proof of his obvious attachment to Anakin, has shaken that respect. He wonders how long it will be before they ask him to step down, to allow a more appropriate master to be named in his place. After an interminable debate, the council meeting disbands, Obi-Wan receiving his instructions on when and where Hardeen will be looking for him later tonight. He has only a few short hours. The counselors' holograms will either wink out of existence or they physically leave, off to attend to their numerous and ever-growing duties. Master Plo, Obi-Wan calls out as they shuffle out, holding up a hand to forestall the other master from hurrying. The Keldor turns and inclines his head inquisitively, peering away from Masters Windu, Yoda, and Teen.
How may I assist you?
He rumbles through his anti-ox mask. Obi-Wan inhales deeply and steels his voice, reminding himself to keep his words and his surface-level thoughts calm and composed, befitting of a Jedi Master. A friend of mine, Senator Padme Amidala, is investigating a political matter at my request, Obi-Wan says finally, once he believes his voice will hold steady. I cannot say for certain who she might reach out to, or even if she may need any help at all during this ruse, but if she does, I suspect she may contact you. In our past discussions, I have indicated that you share our fervent belief that this particular politician should be removed from the public sphere. Master Plo Koon's face furrows, then brightens.
Are we finally trying to publicly shame that terrible man out of office?
He asks eagerly. Obi-Wan nods.
Oh, that is excellent news.
I thought you might feel that way. You made your displeasure with Anakin's decision very clear. Shortly after his knighting ceremony and the Battle of Geonosis, the council had offered Anakin their support should he decide to come forward and share his experiences with the press. Anakin had demurred.
And you excoriated me most brutally for that,
Master Plo Koon rejoins dryly. He is an adult. It was his decision to make, Obi-Wan says defensively. He simply felt that there was no point in dredging up old wounds, especially when he was the only minor that Palpatine ever seemed to take an interest in, and we had a war to focus on.
So what changed then? He seemed fairly implacable at the time.
Anakin is not exactly aware of the current investigation, Obi-Wan admits reluctantly. If Master Plo Koon had had any eyebrows, they would have flown off his head at this statement. I can respect the fact that it's his decisions to make, and still admit that it's terribly short-sighted. If Anakin won't come forward, I just have to find some other bit of wrongdoing to help bring Palpatine to justice.
Interesting approach,
Master Plo Koon says thoughtfully.
And are you sure that there is something else to find?
He's a politician, there must be, Obi-Wan says dryly. In all seriousness, yes. Most of what Senator Amidala has been able to establish thus far is that he is quite determined to hide his wealth in all manner of shadowy accounts. He has his money spread across the entire Republic, scribbled away in fake corporations and aliases galore. Why do so, unless there was something to hide?
Is this investigation part of the reason for Senator Amidala's role in the formation of this new so-called delegation of 2000? I quite enjoyed the look on Sheev Palpatine's face when the delegation was officially announced during floor sessions.
Yes, it was one of the motivating factors, though not the sole inspiration. His ever-growing executive powers are a cause of great concern amongst a certain subset of politicians.
In that we are in complete agreement,
Master Plo Koon says, with a shake of his head.
More and more, the success of the war effort seems to depend solely on one man. We spend a good deal of effort protecting him from all manner of insane plots, because even Dooku has realized that the Republic's will and ability to fight seems to rest entirely with Sheev Palpatine. This ridiculous Hardeen mission is the latest example. I do not deny the Chancellor's office has always been important, and that their elimination would be a potential blow to morale, but we have never before been concerned that their absence will cause the entire government to grind to a halt. What happens when the war ends and he is asked to cede his emergency powers? The Senate must find some way to function without him.
Sometimes I wonder if the Senate will even ask for such a thing, Obi-Wan admits. Master Plo Koon looks up sharply. They've never liked making hard decisions that might affect their re-election chances. This way they could fob all the controversial items off on Palpatine, so they don't have to defend their votes back home.
That this investigation is needed now more than ever,
Master Plo Koon declares with an air of finality.
I will of course give Senator Amidala whatever help she requires, you needn't worry. Please focus only on this mission. You will need no other distractions if you are to succeed.
When have I ever failed this council?
I do not debate your ability to complete the mission, only your ability to do so while respecting your own personal health and safety.
Master Plo Koon replies archly. Obi-Wan makes a grumbling noise of complaint, and Master Plo Koon chuckles, clasping a hand to his.
May the Force be with you, my friend.
Obi-Wan continues through the temple toward Anakin's bright presence on one of the lower entry levels. Despite Obi-Wan's misgivings, Anakin had insisted on being there for Obi-Wan's supposed death. He had claimed his own reaction would be what sold the ruse, and that sounded like council reasoning if Obi-Wan ever heard it, and if he ever figured out which of the other counselors had shared that particular bit of brilliance with Anakin, he'd stick his foot so far up their ass they'd have a hard time sitting still through the next council meeting.
It'll be easy enough to pretend in a moment,
Anakin had claimed.
You'll inject yourself with that black market sedative before, right? Master Windu said it won't last long, but while it does, you'll register as dead by any reasonable measure. Heartbeat, brain activity, and it'll feel real, at least for a little bit.
He murmurs hellos to a few of the other Jedi as he passes, exchanging a brief word here and there when he can. The war often keeps him away from the temple for months at a time, and he misses so much. He's just setting foot over the threshold to the great entryway, a thin battalogia that seems to stretch upwards infinitely, and can spot Anakin in the distance when he hears his name. Master Obi-Wan! Ahsoka calls out, her face lighting up as she approaches from the opposite corner as Anakin. Obi-Wan tries his best not to freeze guiltily. She jogs towards him, smiling. There you are! Sky Guy said you were trapped in council meetings all day.
We agreed to a short break.
Obi-Wan lies smoothly. Anakin has seen that he's been waylaid and is walking towards them now. With the delay caused by Obi-Wan's conversation with Master Plo Koon, they have less than an hour to be in position and no time to waste.
Tempers are always better on a full stomach.
Are we going to Texas? Ahsoka's voice is happy, pleased, and Obi-Wan begins to panic!
Anakin! Obi-Wan says sharply across the pond. You were supposed to make sure Ashoka wasn't here! She should have witnessed this! I can't do this to her! I gave her plenty of work. She should be in the archives right now, researching obscure outer rim worm species. It's not my fault she decided to slag off. Snips!
Anakin greets out loud. He crosses his arms over his chest.
Didn't I just give you an important archival research project?
Come on, Sky Guy, she upwinds. You can't seriously expect me to be researching worms in the middle of a war. How can that possibly be important at a time like this?
Remember the second battle of Geonosis and those brain worms. Anakin insists. Don't you think that it would have helped to have some sort of familiarity with our biology? Besides, the subjects of these sorts of archival assignments aren't really the important part. Believe me, you'll never learn Madame Nu's organization system better than after having to spend 6 or 7 hours forced to research a totally random and pointless topic your master assigned to you. It familiarizes you with areas of the archives you wouldn't normally go to. Obi-Wan chimes in, fondly memories of Anakin's own vicious complaints ringing in his head.
Okay, whatever, sure, Ahsoka says with a wave of her hand. I'll get to it after dinner. Let's go get some greasy, salty chamber fries.
Snips. Anakin's voice is annoyed now, but Obi-Wan cuts him off across the bond. We can't keep pressing it, he says grimly. She's a bright girl, she'll start getting suspicious, and we're running out of time. When the chase begins, we'll just have to split up and hope she's far enough ahead not to see it happen in person. She'll probably feel the bond snap, but it's much weaker than ours, so hopefully it won't be too debilitating. There's nothing to be done about it now. So tell me, how are you progressing with this new reverse grip you've adopted?
Obi-Wan says pleasantly, lightly, as he turns towards open side of the loggia and the forest of columns it frames. It is these columns that mark the official exit to the temple. They descend the steps towards the military shipyards erected near the base of the temple, the quickest shortcut to a public hover tram that will take them to Dex's, a trek they've made dozens if not hundreds of times. It also fairly well known amongst the holopress, who liked to lie in wait for them to get sound bites every now and again. And a routine, publicly known route, was perfect hunting grounds for an assassin.
Anakin tells me he tried to talk you out of it, but you absolutely insisted.
Ahsoka happily keeps up her stream of chatter, and eventually Anakin begins to chime in, teasing her ruthlessly in a familiar, well-loved pattern. Obi-Wan stays silent for the most part, chiming in only occasionally when he thinks they are running out of steam, and he wants to wind them both back up again. A blaster bolt shatters the camaraderie. Obi-Wan grabs Ahsoka's shoulders, flinging her away from him. It's just a second too soon to claim that Obi-Wan was caught totally by surprise, even with his Force-enhanced senses and reflexes, but, well, he's not letting his grand padawan get shot for this mission, and if Ahsoka expresses any suspicions, surely the Council can smile mysteriously and give some platitude about how well in tune with the Force Obi-Wan was before he died. So sad.
The sniper's on the roof!
Obi-Wan calls out once they have all safely taken cover behind a few crates. He scans the horizon.
There!
Rhaegal Hardeen seems to realize he's been spotted and begins to sprint in the opposite direction. Don't let him get away! Ahsoka says, standing to her feet.
Split up, Anakin commands. I'll try to cut him off from the left.
And so the chase begins. Anakin tearing ahead and Ahsoka staying stubbornly close to Obi-Wan as they leap over crates of munitions and medical supplies, Rhaegal Hardeen always darting just in and out of the corner of their eyes. It's frustratingly hard to keep track of his position from below, so Obi-Wan quickly scales one of the low-lying buildings nearby to gain a better vantage point and to give Ahsoka, who remains at ground level, a precious few seconds of lead time so that there is more distance between the two of them. He leaps over the gaps between buildings, hot on Rhaegal Hardeen's trail, until suddenly he's not. Obi-Wan slows, cautiously creeping forward.
I've lost sight of the bounty hunter,
Obi-Wan declares into his comm. Ahsoka and Anakin's voices come through his vambrace crackly and staticky, confirming that they too have no visual confirmation. Obi-Wan catches a glint of metal, a whisper in the Force directly across from him, and darts back behind a tall outcropping on the roof. He breathes in and out, once, twice, 3 times, then, from beneath the folds of his sleeves, he slips out the small ejector pen that Master Windu handed him earlier today and stabs it into the meat of his thigh. The effect is almost immediate. Obi-Wan's muscles relax despite the adrenaline of the moment, and his vision begins to go a little hazy.
Goodbye for now, dear one,
he says, drawing a steel door shut across the bond.
Wait, no, Obi-Wan, you didn't tell me you were gonna black the...
Anakin's thoughts are cut off as Obi-Wan's shields ripple and settle in place. It's still enough to sense Anakin, but not enough to maintain their usual chatter and free-for-all mental exchange. With one last inhale, Obi-Wan walks calmly out from behind his cover and takes a blaster bolt straight to the chest. It's a direct hit, and even with the blaster vest, the breath is knocked from Obi-Wan's lungs. He tumbles over the edge of the roof, Anakin and Ahsoka's cries of dismay ringing in his ears as he thuds against the ground. The sedative must have some sort of painkiller mixed in, though, for Obi-Wan can't feel a thing. He must lose some time, because when he next blinks,
Ahsoka looms over him, her big eyes wide and scared, as the edges of his vision start to blur. He can see that she is ghosting her small hands over his body, frantically searching for an easy-to-fix wound, but he can't feel it, not really.
Master Obi-Wan!
Her voice is small, far away, as Anakin's pale face suddenly enters his field of view, mouthing something. Obi-Wan blinks muzzily at him, confused. He knows he should be concerned, but in the next second the thought simply runs away from him. His eyelids feel as if they are weighed down with lead, so he lets them slip shut just one final time. Distantly, he can feel Anakin and Ahsoka grabbing at his consciousness through the Force, but his mind just slips through their fingers like water. Then, darkness. For all the Council's concerns, the mission goes rather well. Right up until they land on Naboo for the Festival of Lights, and everything starts to fall apart. Dooku's in the wind, completely unresponsive to any of their calls, but a group of hardened bounty hunters can still invoke plenty of chaos with or without Dooku's help. Most of the bounty hunters have taken the opportunity provided by the Ray Shield dissolution to cause carnage back in Theed. Meanwhile, Cad Bane and Maraldo Ival have not lost sight of the bigger picture, and have used the chaos to drag the unconscious Chancellor into an empty speeder, hence why Obi-Wan is currently tearing after them in a stolen speeder bike. He can tell through the muted bond that Anakin is not far behind, but it is likely the only backup he can expect. Master Windu and the other Jedi are too preoccupied trying to ensure that the festival does not turn into a civilian slaughter. Bane jerks the speeder to a halt, the Chancellor's limp head lolling to the side, and Maraldo Ival squealing at the sudden change in momentum. Obi-Wan turns his own speeder sharply, not even allowing it to fully come to a halt, before he's launching himself off of it in a fantastic somersault. The speeder continues into the trees, where it explodes in a fantastic whoosh of light and sound. He lands lightly on his feet, hands warily raised in a loose fighting stance, as Cad Bane gives him a narrow-eyed look.
Traitor.
He hisses.
Jedi turncoat. What did they promise you? Glory? Money? It's all lies. The Jedi never honor their promises.
Behind Bane, the Chancellor is beginning to shake himself awake, looking around in confusion and blinking fuzzily at the scene unfolding in front of him. He turns to Maraldo Ival, who is watching Bane and Obi-Wan as Rhaegar Hardine's confrontation with wide, worried eyes. As one, they launch themselves at one another, grappling furiously as the whine of a second speeder bike and humming of an ignited lightsaber fills his ears. Anakin has arrived. Obi-Wan absorbs the blow from a particularly well-placed cut to the ribs and turns his head sharply to call out to Anakin, who is charging toward them at full tilt. "I can handle this!" he calls out in a commanding voice. "Go! Help the Chancellor!" Anakin hesitates only a moment more before changing direction and launching himself at Maraldo Ival. Bane and Obi-Wan rush towards each other again, Bane rising into the air to take aim with his wrist guard. Obi-Wan ducks and weaves to avoid the incoming blaster bolts. He jumps into the air, secures his grip, and shifts his center of gravity down, pulling Bane with him. They swing wildly for a moment before crashing to the ground in a violent tangle of limbs. "Master!" Anakin calls across the bond, voice tinny and distant with Obi-Wan's shields, which have been his constant companions this past month. He can't quite make out the rest of whatever Anakin is shouting mentally. "Not now, Anakin!" Obi-Wan thinks to himself, the response automatic despite the fact that Anakin surely cannot hear him. "I am a little preoccupied at the moment." Obi-Wan rolls away and jumps to his feet, immediately launching himself into a roundhouse kick. Bane catches his foot and uses it to toss Obi-Wan further away from himself, or at least he tries. Obi-Wan uses the Force to fix Bane's hands in place. Halting another being's movement, especially in the heat of battle, is difficult, so he can only hold it for a moment, but it's enough to free his ankle and surprise Bane! The bounty hunter's eyes widen in realization.
Jedi!
He hisses. Obi-Wan spins around and delivers a strong blow to Bane's chest with his fist. The bounty hunter falls to the ground with one final thud, choking for breath. Obi-Wan kneels immediately and removes a length of synth cord from his utility belt, winding it quickly, efficiently around all of Bane's limbs. The stillness of the forest night air is broken only by Bane's curses and promises of vengeance. Obi-Wan rolls his eyes and extends a hand. "Oh, do be quiet," he says, using the Force to lull Bane into unconsciousness. There's 2 moments of silence. Then, Anakin rushes forward, his face a rictus of concern. "Obi-Wan!" he cries out, voice hushed but tense.
He stops a short distance away, muscles quivering with the effort it takes to rein himself in, and stares.
Are you okay?
Obi-Wan glances sharply to the Chancellor, standing just a few meters away, and watching the proceedings with the oddest look on his face.
I'm fine, dear one,
he says, fully opening himself to the bond for the first time in weeks. Anakin exhales and dares to dart out his hand, brushing the tips of his fingers against Obi-Wan's, as if to verify that he's really there. As quickly as it begins, he's withdrawing once more, his Force signature far calmer, centered.
This is so weird,
Anakin says out loud, tilting his head and scrunching up his nose as he stares at Obi-Wan as Rico Ardine's face. Obi-Wan can't quite help the small affectionate smile that blooms across his face.
Imagine being the one who actually has to see the weirdness every time you look in a mirror,
he responds dryly.
I will be very glad to have my beard back soon.
Master Kenobi,
the Chancellor interrupts. Obi-Wan straightens his spine and pivots to face Palpatine. The older politician regards him a long moment.
It really is you. I must say I was unaware of such a daring plan.
The Council decided that utmost secrecy was necessary,
Obi-Wan replies stiffly.
Really?
The Chancellor turns his gaze to Anakin over Obi-Wan's shoulder. He gives the younger man a significant look.
I am relieved that the Council trusts you with such important information, Anakin. It's the very least you deserve.
Obi-Wan would never lie to me, Anakin replies artlessly, shrugging. Obi-Wan winces internally at the none too subtle implications of that turn of phrase. Externally, he simply raises his chin and meets the Chancellor's probing gaze evenly. Anakin continues, oblivious to the Chancellor's scrutiny and sounding apologetic.
I hope you don't blame the Jedi for keeping it a secret from you, sir. We only wanted to protect you.
Oh, no worries, my boy. I understand.
Palpatine waves a hand and puts on a gentle smile. Obi-Wan gets the sense of a piece slotting into place, suddenly making sense of half-finished, particularly challenging puzzle.
I understand completely.
Obi-Wan clears his throat, desperately searching for some distraction that will bring a stop to Palpatine's discomfiting assessment.
We should return to Theed,
is what he finally says, shuffling over to where Bane still lays. He uses the Force to levitate his unconscious body into the speeder, joining a similarly bound and unconscious Moraldo Ival.
Dooku did not mention reinforcements, but I doubt he truly shared all the details of his plan with a mere gun for hire.
Anakin nods, then extends his arm in a loose defensive stance and reignites his lightsaber.
Of course, right this way, Chancellor.
Anakin helps the Chancellor into the back seat of the speeder, then goes to hop in the driver's seat, his usual perch. Obi-Wan stops him with a hand to his shoulder and a cocked eyebrow.
No lightsaber, remember? Better for you to keep your hands free in case we do run into any trouble,
he says. Anakin makes another face, reluctantly sliding into the passenger side.
If you insist, he groans. Could you at least try to get us back to Theed before sunrise? I do not fly that slow.
Obi-Wan responds, insulted.
Sure, whatever you say, old man.
Obi-Wan secures his hands around the steering wheel with a bare minimum of grumbling, banking the speeder to point its nose back towards Theed. He pushes the throttle, perhaps a little harder than he normally would. It has nothing to do with Anakin's teasing. He's just trying to get back to Theed and away from the Chancellor as soon as possible. And they're off, the wind rushing through their hair.
How was your mother? Did she enjoy the chance to finally see you in person?
Obi-Wan asks across the bond, partly to pass the time without giving anything away to Palpatine, and partly to revel in finally allowing himself access to the full depth and breadth of their bond once more. Anakin pushes a handful of happy memories over to him, sharing tzai with his mother and Hondo. The shrieking laughter of the children of Tatooine as Anakin pantomimed out his and Obi-Wan's best adventures for them, meeting Beru in person for the first time, his sister in all but blood.
Yeah, though obviously she didn't really like the reason. I'm pretty sure she realized it was a ruse, though, so she won't be too mad when you call to apologize. Yes, that unpleasant conversation. I suspect I will have to go through several variations of it. Cody, Satine, Senator Organa. Heads up, Ahsoka is on Naboo guarding the Queen and Padme. So be prepared to have the first of those unpleasant conversations in, 30 minutes or so. She's your padawan. Surely you could explain the situation to her first? Soften the blow? Nuh-uh, Anakin says cheerfully. You made me lie to her for nearly a full month. The only thing that kept me going was imagining the look on your face when you inevitably reveal the truth to her and she kicks you in the shins. Thanks, dear one. Anytime. Obi-Wan swings the speeder around and Anakin clambers. He holds a hand up. Let me go explain the situation first. Naboo's security might panic if they see one of the bounty hunters they were supposed to apprehend suddenly showing up with the Chancellor in tow. And, sir, if you don't mind, I'm sure the medics would like to check you over before you go any further. If you both wait here, I'll be back shortly. Good point, Obi-Wan says. Let me know when everyone's been briefed.
Anakin lopes off, leaving Obi-Wan and Chancellor Palpatine to stand in awkward silence beside the speeder.
The night insects of Naboo chirp loudly, their odd luminescent flashing occasionally in the dark.
I was under the impression that romantic attachment was frowned upon amongst the Jedi,
the Chancellor finally says, his tone casual, his eyes anything but. I have no idea what you're referring to, Obi-Wan replies with a studied air of nonchalance.
Of course. I was only surprised, you see, for Anakin confides in me for many things, but never once has he mentioned your relationship. You must be very special indeed to inspire such uncharacteristic reticence.
Obi-Wan rolls on the Chancellor, fingers clenching against the thin air where his saber normally would be. He glances at the other man. Stay away from him!
Come now, Master Kenobi,
Chancellor Palpatine says, scolding yet jocular, every inch the kind grandfatherly politician he's always made himself out to be.
I know that years ago you refused to let Anakin meet with me because you told him my friendship must have had some nefarious motive behind it. But of the two of us, who was it that cultivated Anakin's trust and loyalty through years of careful mentorship, only to turn around and coax him into bed? Certainly not I.
Obi-Wan flinches.
The Chancellor smiles serenely.